Excited today for our webinar with my amazing guests and friends that are joining. Thanks everybody for joining today. We may have a few more people popping in over the next 5 or 10 minutes, as they often do, but super excited to talk about building communities of play. It is a topic that I think when we do workshops about the 6 points of connection, I think the community of play is the one that I think both causes the most fun and also the most sense of like, that's something I need to work on. So I'm really glad that we're able to spend a little time today talking through that. We're going to start off. Lakshmi is going to lead us in an exercise. So hopefully all of you are stretched and ready to go on that front, not physically, but emotionally and intellectually. And then Jill and I are going to be going through some key insights from her amazing career, as well as what we've seen in our study of communities of play across the country. And then Eric is going to, for the last segment, spend some time with me really looking at the results of a study that we just did. We just got the data in less than a month ago about the people who are actually creating these communities of play. Because we spent a lot of time talking about why we should be part of them, the great benefits of them, but like, what does it actually take, and who are these heroes who are creating these amazing communities of play? So with that, and I love how your logo is animated. That's just like so awesome. Like I totally, as soon as I saw that, I was like, Lakshmi, I'm gonna go and change our logo because that's just so much fun. I don't know how it's gonna get
It,
animated, but I want it animated. That's just amazing.
it's a GIF. It's easy.
All right.
We can do that for Chamber of Connection as well.
All right.
Well, I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm Lakshmi. I call myself a lifelong kindergartner. I try to look at every day with openness, curiosity, and wonder. I grew up in India chasing straight A's because I was told play is a waste of time. So I did the thing, engineering, MBA, consulting, 11 years in big tech, building for 500 million people was a fun ride. But I was craving more meaning and I was feeling super disconnected. So in 2024, I took a gap year, traveled the world, creating, like play workshops wherever I was going, and I realized the power of play. And around the time, I spent some time with the US Chamber of Connection, and our
Woohoo.
fearless leader, Aaron,
Well, just
did some
before we
work
hold on a
there.
sec, because when I introduced you very, very briefly, which I didn't really do justice, Lakshmi was
It's
one
all
of
good.
the very first volunteers who like really helped us get off the ground in Seattle, and I honestly don't think we would be here without her. So I just want to also just
Oh
say
my
thank you
God,
for
that's
that. So
tall.
it's amazing.
Well, through all of my explorations, I realized how the power of play and how it can spark creativity, connection, and wellness. So that's how NoomaLooma, my new company, was born. We're building two things: a digital product that stacks creativity through your day, 3-minute micro exercises to spark joy, and then an IRL container to give all of us permission to play in a productivity obsessed world. And we're going to kick off the session with a tiny play activity because here's what I've noticed. We are really good at introducing ourselves by what we do, and we almost know nothing about the human behind the workload. So we're going to switch that up today.
Woohoo.
Next slide. Aaron, I think you have control. Okay.
Okay.
Today's activity is called the mocktail mashup. It's going to happen in the next 47 seconds. Two ingredients from your personality and two ingredients from your food world, and that's your mocktail. And your mocktail name is going to wait for you. Before you dive in, there's no good, no bad, only play. Like spin up as many mocktails as you would want. I can get started. I'm feeling playful, goofy, and two ingredients would be chili flakes and clementine. I'd go with tropic juggler. The time starts now. 47 seconds. Let's go.
In the
Drop your
chat?
mocktail in the chat.
All
Yes.
right.
Let's go. Oh my God. Tropical hurricane. There we go. Love that. Love buoyancy and coming together. Ooh, hello, Zesty. Tamale curious. Oh my God, I love the mix of irreverent and dandelion out here. Look at that.
We're gonna have to like find a way to make all these.
I know. I'm gonna try and doodle all of these. That's a good challenge for myself.
I
Jet lagged, espresso, Red Bull, chili, pineapple. Love
think
that.
that'd wake my ass up.
Oh, Marissa is here. I know Marissa. Beautiful. Logical plus goofy. Love that combo.
Sparkle Driver is excellent.
Ooh.
Oh my God. Had this been IRL, we would have made all of these mocktails and tasted each of it too.
Next
That
time.
would have been fun. Next time,
Next time
yes.
in Jersey City.
Jersey City or the Connected City Summit, which
That's
is
right.
upcoming.
That's
That would
right.
be
Up in
fun.
October. Little
Yes.
I love this. I love this.
Bland ladle. Love it. Oh my God, this is beautiful.
I need to figure out how to read into each of these, like, what they mean and what they should tell us.
We were fever.
Weaver Fever, yes.
I
We
love it.
were fever is cool. Move on, Bieber fever.
So fun. Well, thank you for leading us through that. That's so fun. Any closing thoughts on what you found with play? I'm curious, play in your life and like how it's changed your life. You talked a little bit, Lakshmi, just about sort of how you were on that journey, but how have you felt like the quality of your life has shifted since you embraced play?
I think I used to be a certainty monger. I needed to have all of my plans buttoned up, but um, when I rediscovered myself through play, I realized that I could unzip my serious suit and still build a company, And I think I've gotten very, very comfortable with uncertainty, which is just amazing. And it's a polar opposite of how I used to lead my life. And then I realized, like, in 40 seconds, you'll get to know so much about people in light ways, light, fun ways. So that's the best thing.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for kicking us off. We're all
Absolutely.
now inebriated and with fun with our mocktails. So thank you. Um, and I'm gonna jump us forward. So thank you for that. Excited to jump into talking about the research and the science and what we know about communities of play. And what a perfect way to start off. So thanks again for that. Jill, you and I know each other originally from Ashoka, right? Is that the original source of both being
I
Ashoka
think
fellows back in the day?
I believe that's how we met. And then I think we did a project with tipping with uh now I'm spacing on the name of the organization you founded, the
Oh,
Taproot
Taproot.
Foundation.
Yes. Yes,
Yes.
that's right. That is
Yeah.
right. And then Eric has been a major partner of ours for the last year as we've launched the U.S. Chamber of Connection. And Eric's platform, Heylo, is the platform that we use for our community organizing, as well as, and I think, Lakshmi, you're the one who helped us find Eric. So it's a great bringing
Yeah.
of the worlds together. So, Eric,
Yes.
if you're happy with us, thank me. And if you're mad, talk to Lakshmi about why you got stuck with us. And has been a great partner in just really building out our community builder network around the country of leaders who are working to build communities mostly through play. And my name is Aaron Hurst, and I am founder and CEO of the U.S. Chamber of Connection. But Joe, I'd love to just jump into your story before we fully go into the data. And Jill, just sharing a little bit about, Playworks and the work you did early on in your career around play and how that's evolved, and what are the key lessons that you've taken from, the incredible work you've done over the years.
Yeah. So I started Playworks. Actually, I founded the first nonprofit I founded was the Museum of Children's Art, MoCA, which is still alive and well in Oakland, California. And I was leading that and was out visiting a school when the principal asked me if I might help fix recess the way that I'd been engaged with bringing art back to their school. And it was really just an interesting. I was pregnant with my oldest kid at the time, and I thought it was just going to be this sort of local, like,
Hmm.
oh, sure, that could be fun. And it was a wild, and especially in contrast with having launched MoCA, where we were really pushing schools to adopt the arts. Um, when people heard that I was working on a project to try and, make recess safer, more inclusive, funner. Um, Funner is a really important
It is a
word.
really important word.
Um, the phone started ringing off the hook, and it was just it was a somewhat unusual
Mm.
experience, I think, for a social entrepreneur. And so it grew very quickly locally in the Bay Area, and then grew throughout the U.S. after that, in no small part thanks to big support from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And they were really interested in it because of health outcomes. So it was funny, we were this school-based, and we thought of ourselves as being sort of education-y.
Hmm.
But the rest of the world really saw us in a lot of ways as being more health focused. And ultimately, what was so funny for those of us who were in it and doing it is we got into it because we believed in the power of play. I really, I'm so glad we start with play. We talk about play, and it's like in that moment when you're playing, it's such a great thing to see. Like you're not thinking about anything else. You're like super present. It's super engaged. And there was some word like the sort of productivity obsessed world and this sort of a certainty monger. Like I appreciate Lakshmi saying all those things because I think of play as being any activity undertaken for no apparent purpose. And so anything that we can do to sort of squash the tyranny of apparent purpose feels like a valuable asset. And we found this to be true in schools. And so those of us building Playworks over the last 30 years, I think the thought has been, oh, this is fun for us. Let's make play more a part of the school day. It's like infusing a little bit of summer camp into the school day. But the rest of the world had other reasons for wanting it, right? Principals were interested in us as a cost-effective solution to their group management problem at
Mm.
lunchtime and recess, and other people were excited about us as a increase for vigorous physical activity. There were studies done that showed that we reduced bullying. All of it, though, at the end of the day, I think what proved to be the most important thing, both in building the organization that is Playworks, as well as bringing this much play to kids, was we created an opportunity for kids to see each other and to be seen and to feel
Mm.
connected and this real profound sense of belonging. Not always, but that it
Sure.
was experienced.
And how have you seen, like, now that you've also applied it somewhat to us adult types? I'm curious, how you've seen, like, we talk about kids needing play. Like, do adults need play too? Like, what have you learned in that
Yeah.
process, that journey?
Yeah. So founded a consulting business called Workswell, and the principle is really that the same things. And your study is delightful for me because it really like there it is in numbers, but we're just big kids. Like lifelong kindergarten is a great frame for really all of us, and so the extent to which as a human navigating the world that when people are behaving in a certain way, I do wonder, are you hungry, angry, lonely, tired? Which are the first things I would check with my kids too. Um, it's not particularly surprising that the principles that we saw at play in rolling out Playworks in the schools, and we also, when we would introduce Playworks at the schools, we would always introduce the concepts to the teachers and have them experience that, as a way to then learn
Mm.
how to apply those principles in the classroom. But then doing it with corporate leaders. I spent a year as a fellow down at Stanford at the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design, better known as the D School. And they call them in human-centered design Stokes. So they sound sexier, but I was with all these, Silicon Valley CEOs playing games that I had led on playgrounds throughout America. And so it's a known um, fact that actually accessing play helps increase our comfort with ambiguity and sparks sort of creativity and thinking that can run counter to sort of traditional ways of patterns of thinking and problem solving, all of which sort of opens up and loosens and encourages, most importantly, I think, trust and rapport among the humans who are playing together, but then
Yeah.
also the sort of that creative, imaginative brain.
Yeah. No, it is super powerful. So, Jill, as you know, we did a study in October of last year. We interviewed about 2,000 people. and looked at a lot of different questions. But one of the ways we looked at it was looking at people who are parts of community of play versus are not parts of community of play. And we're really defining a community of play as, being part of an ongoing group that does an activity together that you all enjoy. Um,
Mhm.
that really sort of is at the simplest definition of it. And we'd really seen in looking at secondary research how that was one of the things that was often referenced in the research as being critical to enabling connection. That there's a lot of different ways of connecting, but it kept on coming up as one of the ones that was cited across different studies, and especially studies looking at parks, studies looking at different ways in which people from different cultures are interacting with each other, how critical it is to have communities that get together to play. And, I think just as you shared, like we play together as kids, but it's just as important as adults. So when we looked at these social determinants of your well-being, what we saw was that when it looked at like, do people get social support? 93% of people who are part of a community of play said that they feel like they have social support versus 65. When you look at life satisfaction, 74% of people who are part of a community of play say, yep, I'm got life satisfaction versus 40%. Trusting others. So people who actually engage in communities of play are much more likely to trust other people. They're much more likely to connect across difference. So again, as we think about the problems in our nation, like the importance of being able to connect across difference is so critical. And they're also more likely to feel politically empowered, like they have a voice that the government represents them, simply because they belong to a community of play. Like we think about all these complicated New York Times op-ed style ways of solving problems when the answer may be, like you said, getting together without any apparent purpose, and just having fun might address a lot of these problems. So I'm curious for you, like which of these stands out most to you as either validating of what you've experienced or somewhat surprising of your experience?
Well, I would say the politically empowered one is really interesting to me. I mean, all of them feel of a whole cloth. Um, One of the key things I think that makes play play is volition. Like you can't be forced to play. You can be forced to do sports, but you can't be forced to play. And
Interesting.
I think that choice, I think that issue of choice. So one of my favorite definitions of a game is the voluntary attempt to overcome an unnecessary challenge, which I just, right? Like, which
So good.
feels like so often like just the nature of life, right? And like,
Yeah.
and the question about one's ability, one's relative joy quotient is the extent to which you're able to really choose
Yep.
that necessary challenge, right? And like some of the best experiences of my life were these random unnecessary challenges I put before myself, right? Undoubtedly. And there is some privilege in being able to do that, right?
Definitely.
And that volition, I think, it shouldn't be overstated. One of the thing this makes me think about is that at one point, when Playworks was first getting going, we had Nadine Burke Harris, who was then she later became uh, the Surgeon General for California. And
Mhm.
she's done extraordinary work. She's really led the field around adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and she's doing the work nationally. She just founded a new nonprofit. But she was out and she was observing Playworks in the wild. And
Yep.
she turned to me at one point and she said, you know what, if you were designing something, a program that was intentionally like built to address the needs of kids who've experienced adverse childhood experiences, it would look essentially just like Playworks, right?
Mm.
The way you handle transitions, the way you give kids choice and voice, the way you just everything about being brought together and allowed to figure out what's going on and to engage as you choose. Like so much of life
Yeah.
precludes that. And that's true for us as grown-ups, right? Like
Totally.
the world is overwhelming. So what are the small structures and experiences that can be designed and achieved for humans so that they feel like they have choice and voice, so that they feel like their intrinsic motivation is the driving force behind how they're spending their time. And I think the more we have of that, the more optimism, the more belief, the more, again, all these things, the trust in other people. I really think we trust is at the heart of all of this.
No, I think it's great. I love the point about it. It's like a point of agency. Like you have to decide that you're going to be a part of it. And I think
Hmm.
people who for whatever reason aren't able to do that, then probably also see a lot of the rest of the world the same way. Like it is not a choice. And when you see that actually your life is a set of choices, sometimes they don't feel like they're a choice. Sometimes maybe they aren't, but it opens you up to then see things like, your political system, et cetera, in a different way because you see like, oh, like maybe I can do something about it versus the world happens to me.
Hmm.
So sadly, what we found is just 70% of people don't currently belong to a community of play, which is some, it doesn't mean they don't have any play in their life. It just means they're not part of a community of play where they regularly get together, people who do activities together. Like, I'd be curious, like, did you expect it to be, does this number surprise you at all? Is this about what you'd expected?
I was psyched about 30%. I'm like, great, a
Yeah,
third of us are out there playing together. That seems really hopeful.
yeah,
I leaned into the 30. I was interested by when you did the breakdown too. Like as a woman who
yep,
plays and goes out and play, I have often noticed, and I do lean towards more rough and tumble sports,
yep.
but even like playing golf, you disproportionately, I would have thought that it was more uneven around gender, but I
Yep.
was psyched about the 30%. Um, it feels like there's a good platform to build on to get to the other 70 to come play with us.
A perfect soundbite. I love that. So when we looked at this question, like what enables people to thrive, like we found overall that basically 1 in 2 American adults right now are struggling with social connection. So if you think about like walking down the street, 1 in 2 people that you run across are struggling with connection. And the people who aren't, we're finding, are doing these 6 points of connection, which is the basis of our work at the U.S. Chamber of Connection. They range from, knowing their neighbor to having a community around identity, one-on-one relationships, having a third place they go, community of play, which is what we're talking about today, and then community service. And we found each one of them plays a unique role in not only enabling an individual to thrive, but also enabling others. And I think I was even listening to a podcast yesterday. It was a Kara Swisher podcast, and so much of the I was talking about longevity, and so much of the work on this topic overall is about personal health and it's about your own well-being. And I think what's really important about community of play and some of these other areas is like you can't do them by yourself. Like they're by definition not only support you but feed the rest of your community. And I think that's so important. And it's one of the things I really feel like is missing in a lot of the connection work is heavily focused on the I instead of the we,
Mm.
ironically. And community of play, I think, is we've seen in the data is the one of the 6 points that has the strongest correlation to outcomes as well as likelihood to adopt the other 5 points of connection. So when we looked at it, we were just going over this data a second ago, but like when we looked at it across all these different variables, um, it's like people who do regular play like significantly are thriving relative to the others. And the two areas where you see the biggest delta it looks like are really around social support, and then you see connecting across difference as the sort of two biggest, which is interesting that those are the two that like made that change. But it makes sense. Like when you're playing with other people, you're building trust, which probably helps towards the social support. And it also means like you have the courage to go out and engage with others. And then connecting across difference, like we know it's one of the best ways of meeting people who are different than yourself because you have that thing in common, which is the golf. It is the rough and tumble sport that you're playing, Jill, whatever that sport is. So you have that in common. I know like when I played pickleball, like I would meet people I wouldn't normally necessarily engage with, but we did enough pickleball together to trust and get to know each other and care about each other. And it's really beautiful just to see that difference. So very much validates that. I want to go to the this next slide, which has to do with the 6 points of connection and looking at the people who engage in a community of play, looking at how much more likely they are to have an emergency contact of a neighbor, a community of people with a shared identity, to socialize weekly, to have a third place to go, and to engage in community service. Like that's marked difference in terms
Yeah.
of whether or not they're connecting in other ways. So when I think about like my point of view on all this changed when I saw this data. Whereas I used to talk about like I don't know where you should start with the 6 points. You'd be like, well, where do you begin? Do I do number one? Do I do number four? Like which point of connection? And I looking at this data, I mean, it depends on the person, but it really makes the case that helping people find a community of play is your best chess move in terms of helping somebody, because it
Yeah.
appears to correlate with the best outcomes.
Hey, Aaron, I have a question.
Yep.
With community play, did you all like I am a gleeful season ticket holder for the Golden State Valkyries.
Yep.
Does attending sporting events count as playing? Do you know if that was included or is that a
I mean, the
question later?
definition is like doing a shared activity, a group that does a shared
Yeah.
activity together. So it'd be
Yeah.
somewhat in the eyes of the beholder. You might define it
I
that
would
way.
have definitely, I would
Someone
have
else might
played
not.
Being as Valkyries as a play activity for sure. So that's that. I love that.
And I think
Thanks.
I think of it as like, so I'm like a ridiculously stupid Yankees fan, like to the point of it being a problem in my family. And I see it as a combination of a community of identity and a community of play. It's a
Yeah.
community of play and that there's like a joy and connection, but there's also this sense of identity where like I go to a Yankees game and sit in the bleachers with a bunch of people who couldn't be more politically different than me, but we immediately are brothers and sisters for like that
Yeah.
period of time. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. I think like professional sports to some degree combines the two in my
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. I
I
love
would
to.
quickly jump in here, if
Yeah,
you
Oh,
don't
please.
mind, to
Yeah.
say one thing that I've found is with the communities that we support on Heylo is that the act of play with your body
yep.
seems to have a transformation that it can make in creating the right environment for people to connect with each other. So,
Hmm.
for example, we support a lot of run clubs on Heylo, and the act of running itself, like, will release endorphins, for
Yeah.
example.
It's a good point.
Oftentimes, people show up without a lot of like makeup or
Oh.
covers to kind of mask their identity, and that act of doing things physically actually creates a better environment for these connections to start to happen.
I
Yeah.
never thought about that makeup point. That's really compelling just around how you have to show up a little bit more naked, if you will, when you're in that environment. And you're also getting sweaty and you're just yeah, it's like less performative even though you're performing.
Yeah,
On the,
that's right. And there's a physical aspect to it as well when like for something like a hiking club, you have a shared common goal that you are physically going to do. You're going to climb to the top of this mountain.
yeah.
Or in a running race, you're going to finish this running race and you're actually doing it like perfectly in sync together. Oftentimes the metaphor that we use is when you have some of your best conversations can often be in a car ride when you're not actually facing squared off with one another, but you're going in the same direction as another person. There's that commonality that exists.
Mm.
So whether it's people that are coming together because they're going to go for a hike, well, yeah, you may be conservative or liberal, but at least like we found one thing that you have in common, and that physical act of pursuing something seems to help alleviate some differences that we have that may prevent connection.
But what happens if the bear is released and starts chasing those two people? Is
That's
it
the
real?
ultimate form of connection, or it could be a disaster Aaron, where just fastest person wins.
There you go. It's a true race. No, I think it's a great insight. So, Eric, how would you use that lens when you think about like professional sports and being a spectator as a form of community?
I wouldn't rule it out. I just
Yeah.
think that there's certain environment we just see so much time and time again that there's certain environments that can be created that are super conducive to building community. And some of those things, there's a variety of factors that go into it. And it's not necessarily that there's one, win all recipe and you have to do it in order to create community. Community can exist in so many different types of places, and it can certainly exist around, rooting for a sports team. But some of the other factors that we do see are things that are physical in nature, like going towards a specific thing together, or going through something that's physically exerting, and it creates that endorphin release, or kind of like having the same thing that you wear. Those are all factors that we see can contribute to it.
The things that people wear is the part where I do think, no, I don't mean to move on, but the professional sports piece, like I think there's an interesting version of not putting on your makeup when you go to sports games. Ah,
I
look at you.
am.
You're
I'm
representing.
repping my Valkyries sweatshirt today,
Nice.
ride or die. I'm like,
I love it.
I
I
want to
love
go
it.
Valkyrie's game with Jill.
Hey,
Right.
but it's the other one I just wanted to pull out though that I think is interesting. I was listening to you describe. I would make a case too for like my mom, my dad. My parents were married for 60 years. My dad died 3 years ago. My 88-year-old mother is like deeply involved with the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, and she goes to classes once or twice a week. And she meets, and it's all, I don't know if it's a whole thing nationally, and they offer the people teach the classes and they take the classes, and it's hosted at different universities. And I know you wouldn't necessarily call it a play activity, but I swear the way my mother engages with it, and like it's a standing event weekly. She
Yep.
gets
An
there, like
activity.
she often walks to it. Like there's everything about it has all the hallmarks of um, belonging to a club,
Yeah.
and she's made friends with people that she met there. They go to lunch, like and it is part of, and anyway, I just think in terms of longevity and connection and organizing principles for your life. Like we need these little structures, I think,
For
to
sure.
like keep us, because it's so easy if you're working and you've got kids to like just fall into the grind. And that's a pattern that we have to intentionally, especially in this modern age and with devices and everything else, just how we live, maybe more so in urban settings than others. But it's just the how do you intentionally design these points of
Yeah.
connection? And I think the intrinsic motivation and play in the broadest, biggest tent sense is just so clearly powerful.
We'll have to figure out the 6 points under this one point. I mean, there's definitely some different variations on what play means, and a lot of it is the mindset I think you bring to it.
Yeah.
But the key thing I think of in the definition is just that you're with a group of people who enjoy something together. And then
Yeah.
within that, I think, Eric, you're right. There are certain types of play that probably trigger more intimacy and trigger more sort of natural release of neurochemicals. And there's others that maybe do less so, but maybe where someone's at and like what creates the value for them. So to your, I want to get to the point about gender. I think one of the things that's interesting too is when we looked at like what were the barriers people said to connecting, people who don't have a community of play had almost three barriers they reported compared to just over two for people
Mm.
who have a community of play. So it's removing barriers from that for them. Um, we also looked at like what were the top barriers people report and how different was it for people who have a community of play versus those who don't. And you just see how I'm uncomfortable going to social events by myself, much more likely to say that if you don't have a community of play. I'm too tired or busy, which is interesting because they actually joined something. So they should be even more tired and more busy, but they're not. And then I don't know where to start. Again, like people who join a community of play are not reporting that as much as a barrier. And there's a chicken and egg question piece to this for sure, but I think really interesting that just starting with one of the points of connection, especially this one, is appears to be opening up and preventing a lot of the barriers that other people are reporting to building connections. So I think it's really important to see it as that unlock. The gender question I found really interesting that what we saw was that males in this sample of 2,000 adults were, a little more likely to be parts of community of play than women. And I'm just curious, I mean, Jill, Eric, Lakshmi, any of you, if you have any insights on reading between the tea leaves, if you will, of like, is that part of the sample? Is that consistent with what you've experienced? I've seen a lot of like gender divided clubs and ways people get together, and then some that are more mixed. And Jill, it sounds like you're hanging with the more rough and tumble crowd.
Well, the first things that come to me is just like historically what's been available, things like golf, and then
Mhm.
certain sporting activities that historically men disproportionately participated in. That's changing dramatically. The other thing I'd say, probably the bigger factor would be childcare and other home responsibilities. That if you are
Mhm.
the human who's responsible for small humans, it's harder to get out and do stuff. I think, and that would be those that
I
always
hear,
certain, sometimes right. That would be why I would guess that out.
well, yeah, I hear that a lot when I've talked to, but yeah, especially mothers of younger kids that like their
Right.
communities of play are actually their kids' community of play. And so
We used
then,
to do this. Yeah, we used to do this thing. We had a girls' basketball league with Playworks early days back when we were sports for
yeah,
kids. And we used to at the same time that we were running the girls' basketball league, we'd have a separate space where we were doing Zumba with the moms who came to bring their kids. And it was just like, how do you create opportunities for
that's so
parents
cool.
to be there and play at the same time? It was a fun thing. Yeah.
So cool. Lakshmi, Eric, any insights on what you think might be behind the numbers?
Yeah, I think actually I'm seeing the reverse trend in the field that I'm leading. So in areas of creative expression, there's this whole rise of whimsy maxing amongst the Gen Zs. They want to fight the brain rot by adding little whimsical things in their lives. So if you look at my communities, they're mostly like 90% women, Gen Z women specifically, and it's around like art making. It's around like like infusing daily acts of play in small ways. And playful parenting is another interesting segment as well. Like a lot of people, like while on their commutes, like they want to do things with their kids. Like if they're doing a color walk, for instance, like the kid chases yellow, the mom chases yellow, and they do the shared, practice the sense of wonder together. So that's kind of what we're observing.
So, Eric, what do you see in your data? Is that something you track at all?
We allow group leaders to ask when a member joins their community, what gender are they?
Yep.
And for the groups that opt into that, there is a pretty there's a slight lean towards female across the platform.
Yep.
But we don't exclusively support play-based groups. We support a pretty wide range of communities. But our
Sure.
data is similar to Lakshmi's. It's actually majority women.
Yeah, I wonder how much age and other variables factor in. Again, another topic we could go down for quite a while. And I want to move on to the other study, but I want to make sure we cover these 2 points, which is we're seeing a higher percentage of sort of white and Caucasian versus people of color who are engaging in communities of play, which may be some of the similar trends or some of the variables we talked about around gender. I think the more, and we've seen like with age, that you definitely see this spike at a certain age, and then it goes back down again. And that age really is during, uh, I would call like prime child years. For folks, you see this like spike there, which I thought was really interesting. Sort of goes counter a little bit, Jill, to what you were saying, perhaps. Um, and then this is the piece I find the most disturbing, honestly, is just how strongly correlated income is with people
Yeah.
being parts of community of play. And you just see it looks like it's like 2.5 to almost 3x when you go from folks with very, very low income households to those of moderate to high income. And there are so many different variables that are behind that. But any comments on any of those three variables around, that we just shared?
Well, I did want to point on the income one.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same pattern that we see with recess prevalence at
Mhm.
at schools. That schools that higher income population schools always have recess and play. And it's really at lower income schools where you see the elimination of play and recess. And there's this narrative, right? Like, oh, we don't have time, butts and seats. We don't have time for that. Like, I just think, uh, and and maybe that's a similar argument that's being, we don't have time for it. Like we have to, so yeah, it's a real, it's fascinating for me to see it because that's exactly what it looks like at schools as well.
Do you think that has there been any research you've seen on like if kids didn't get exposed to recess, like as adults, are they more or less likely to engage in play? I've never seen any data along those lines, but I wouldn't be surprised.
So Stuart Brown references research on animals. And
Huh.
I think it was in Stuart's book, there's a study about wolf pups were studied, and
Hmm.
wolf pups that weren't allowed to play with other pups were unable to be members of the pack. They just
Interesting.
unsuccessful as adult wolves. But I can't speak to humans.
Wolves are much more interesting. So I think we can all say we have resolved that question. No, I mean it's devastating to think. I mean, in general, how much inequality there is in this, but also that um, if we're not doing that for the next generation, like there's long-term consequences for that. And I think with the rise in technology, I would assume we're seeing even less of that kind of play happening, and that's going to lead to some pretty dire consequences down the road.
Although it's funny, I mean, I think you could make the case that kids are playing online and they are
Yeah.
playing with others. I mean, like
Yeah, but
I'm
wolf pups have a
curious.
hard time with screens, I find. Like their
Wolf
paws are
pups,
not good at the
the
like.
opposable thumb thing is
I
really
know
an
it's
issue.
really hard
Yeah,
for them. So
yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, and I think there's always the questions about like is online play, how does that have
Does
that
it count?
does it, I mean, probably some part of it counts for something. I don't think it's a like
Yeah.
zero thing. In some cases, maybe it's negative, but at least they don't skin their knees as often, I guess, when you're playing video games. But
I'm pro knee skins. I used to tell
yes,
my children go outside and
go
break
hurt
their arms.
yourself.
Go forth, go hurt yourself. Shock
Boy,
and awe parenting. Yes.
exactly. Well, I am going to, I think, we need to just time-wise move on to the next segment, but Jill, please stay on and I love your comments as we're going through this as well. But just great having your perspective on it. And I think really understanding how that's experienced by kids and how that evolves as adults, and also just seeing the interplay between those with our wolf pups. I will forever remember the wolf pups. So very, very powerful. Um, so Eric, let's jump into this piece. This part is really fun. So we spent a lot of time, and Jill, you know this from the work in Lakshmi as well. Like, there's a lot of work spent supporting entrepreneurs out there. There's schools for them, support groups, like all this going on to support entrepreneurs. But when it comes to people leading these clubs for play, there's very little known about the people who are actually running them. And there are likely tens, if not hundreds of thousands of them across the US. And they are, if we're seeing that being part of a community of play is the number one predictor of your social well-being, if you will. The fact that the people who are making this possible are so sort of misunderstood or not understood, and that we're not shining a light on them, to me is a real problem. So I was really delighted to partner with Eric and the Heylo team to do a survey of the Heylo leaders, folks who are running these clubs, to start to like understand a little bit about who they are. And I'm sure none of it was a surprise to Eric because he's working with them every day. But we've also been doing these support group dinners every month or so in Baltimore, San Francisco, and in Seattle. And then we've been interviewing folks for our podcast, How We Connected, about 20 people so far. So it's also been a chance for us to hear more of the qualitative side of this. Uh, so that's sort of the summary. But do you want us, Eric, give us the 30-second Heylo ad? Like, what in God's name is this Heylo thing of which we speak?
Yes, Heylo is a platform for community groups. We specifically help community leaders who are bringing people together around anything that they're passionate about have a space online where they can organize their events, their communications, and payments, which we'll talk about here, I think, in the survey results. But it's a dedicated home for your club.
And what I love about Heylo, and then we'll get off of praising Heylo, but I love that it's optimized for community. Because a lot of these platforms are just optimized for events and selling tickets, versus like really enabling interaction between the people who are in the community and emphasizing connection. I think there's a lot of platforms out there that talk about it, but Heylo really, I think, prioritizes it religiously, which is phenomenal. So what we want to do is we're just going to walk through some slides to just share some of the initial data. And I thought I'd start you off with your friend Gabe, since make it nice and comfortable for you, Eric. But it was interesting, we were looking at like who are the people who are running these clubs. So the most common backgrounds were event planning, coaching, facilitation, and teaching. So the people that are creating these clubs, those are the backgrounds they're coming out of. Um, Nearly 60% of them have been leading their communities for 3 or more years, and 27% for 6+ years. So we've got some people with some real staying power. And this thought, so this is one of the questions, Eric, I had really wondered about. And when we do our podcast interview people, we always ask around this question, which is, what is someone's origin story? Like, why did they decide to start a community in the first place? And we heard a lot of people say it basically there are one of two reasons. It was either I love golf, therefore I want to have more people to play golf with or run with or whatever the activity is. And the other one is just like, I want to bring people together. And what we saw in the survey is that like by a pretty good margin, the dominant driver for people to create these clubs is for connection and belonging. What else would you share, Eric, like just about like who are the people who you see running clubs? Like what have you noticed about them as their backgrounds or what's motivating them?
The interesting thing that strikes me is that there isn't a specific personality type that defines a community builder. For
Mm,
example, a lot of people will commonly think, oh, gosh, I got to stand in front of a group of people and encourage them to come do this thing that I'm really passionate about. And I'm an introvert. It
yeah,
sounds really daunting. But actually, like in our survey data, we see that it's an equal split between introverted and extroverted personality types. And oftentimes, some of the best community builders are actually introverted because they help create space for others to connect with each other, as opposed to wanting to be the kind of center of an event. Um, or, background types, like, across different demographic, there's really not a specific personality or demographic that defines a community builder. And we often believe at Halo that really anyone can step up and do it.
yeah.
And they just need to make sure that they have the right motivation, to ultimately pursue this thing that they're going to do because it touches and creates a lot of value for people.
Yeah, it seems like the biggest difference is just people who take initiative. Like you have to take that initiative to like get it going. And everyone can do that, but there are certain people who are generally more prone towards taking initiative versus those who maybe are waiting for that invitation a little more. But agree, and I think anyone, and I've seen like in the interviewing, like diversity of people is like remarkable from the most gregarious, outgoing to like the shy, like hard to get a full sentence out of. Like it's amazing the scope of people.
I think that's
Speaking
right
of
there. And to
gregarious, yep,
I was just going to add to that,
yep,
like the word that really struck me that you mentioned was the entrepreneur word.
yep,
Like what defines an entrepreneur? It's someone that kind of saw a problem in the world and tried and took action to do something about it.
yep,
And the result of their action is creating a company, and that company is designed to like maximize profits. And but it can also apply to a foundation. Like what you've done with Chamber of Connection is
yep,
absolutely remarkable and incredible. I would call you an entrepreneur, and I think many of these community builders are entrepreneurs in their own right. Like they've built something that is creating a tremendous amount of value in the people that they touch, and it's because they took an action.
yep.
They decided to see a problem and do something about it, and I think that's under recognized.
Yep. I've been starting to test. You and I had this debate about like what's the better label for this crew, and the phrase that seems to be most motivating is social artist. that they're actually artists in a way, which I absolutely love.
I love
So
that.
these folks who are doing this, just to give people a better sense, like they're um, hosting many events. Like 60% of them host 30 plus events a year. This is not about doing an event. Like that's a lot of events. And they typically reach hundreds of people each year, with over half of them serving over 100 participants annually. And we saw some serve like 5, 10,000 people. Like these are people, these folks are like really helping a lot of people. It's really remarkable the number, but then just the amount of programming that they create for folks. So we looked at like why did people join these? So we asked folks, these community builders, these social artists, these social entrepreneurs, if you will, why they think people join their clubs. What are the reason? And connection and belonging was the number one thing that they felt like people were looking for. And then sort of building friendship and a sense of belonging. So it is very much about the social outcomes. Um, Marketing it as a shared activity and around joy was really big. Personal growth was also something that people felt like was a major driver for people. And it's interesting, in my research with Imperative, we found that the three sources of fulfillment are relationships, impact, and growth. And I think a lot of that is what people are doing in these clubs, is they're looking for fulfillment across those. And we saw life transitions create demand with 23% of people joining because they are new or navigating change. And like they joined this group for that purpose. Anything stand out to you there, Eric, as you sort of think about your experience with your leaders?
The thing that I often think about is that these clubs are really not static either.
Yep,
Like
that's
very
right.
rarely is it the same 100 people that are coming to that
Yep,
event throughout the course of a year. Oftentimes it's 20, 30, sometimes 50% new attendees for every
yep,
event. And so the clubs often to all serve as like these institutions that are bringing people that are going through these like difficult life phases or looking to make a change in their life, into a space and inviting them in. And then, sometimes they graduate from that, and that's okay too. So while like the clubs kind of focus on, hosting, they're often attracting a lot of new people on like every single week.
yeah. For some reason, I got a visual of like a marsh, how like the water gets filtered as it goes out to sea, and it's sort of similar where it's like it's this like place where people go through for transformation, often out into another world, or they hang out in the marsh.
Yeah,
Um,
they smell better though. Communities smell better.
They do, but yeah, it depends. If they were running up that mountain we talked about, they may not, but that makes them connect more. 'Cause you're like, oh my God, I love how much you smell. No, I love how much you smell more. Um, so one of the things I loved, and this spoke to what Jill and I were talking about a few minutes ago, is that people who run these clubs said people are coming to these across areas of difference. So generational difference. So we don't do enough of that in our society. Race. So like we wanting people to come together across race, socioeconomic background, and political beliefs. So 60% are saying that they believe that their social club is or club for play, their community is bringing people together across political difference. And right now, in a world where we know people are not very comfortable with that, it's pretty awesome that play is doing that. And then we see when it comes to the points of connection, people strongly believe that it's creating one-on-one relationships. So it's not that people are just coming to this event and that's done, but it's actually causing people afterwards to build one-on-one relationships, find third places, join other types of communities of identity, to volunteer, and even to meet neighbors and get to know their neighbors. So some pretty freaking amazing outcomes. Like if you think about it, and Jill and I have done a lot of fundraising in our days, but like if you're thinking about outcomes that we'd be wanting to raise money for, like this is pretty phenomenal outcomes that these people are generating for society that we don't really even recognize overall. Anything anybody wants to add there? No need, but just want to. No. All right. They're awesome. Bottom line. Um, so I think the piece that's also really important to understand here is the personal investment. Eric, you were just alluding to this, right? So community building requires real-time commitment with basically two-thirds of people are putting in 3 to 10 hours per week at a minimum of their time to run these. They often share leadership. So they are rarely run by just a person. 75% have at least one co-leader. And many of them, looks like about a half of them have some form of volunteer or leadership team. Only 22% say like they run the whole thing entirely by themselves. So it's really interesting just to see also just how the leadership is formed and how much time goes into running these clubs. And I think you've seen, Eric, like different. I remember when we first met, sort of talking about like where you see the most successful clubs, and a lot of it, if I recall, had to do with them building this kind of leadership structure and like having more people involved. It's not just the a one person show, similar to entrepreneurs.
That is one of the factors that we see to successful and like long-term longevity of communities.
Yep.
If they have multiple leaders, they're more likely to attract more members and they're more likely to survive over the long run. We often see that like for leaders, it requires to build a community a pretty diverse set of skills. Like you need to be that expert planner that is like organizing all of the events and thinking through all the logistics and coming up with the question of the question to have a great successful event. But you also need to have a vision. Like, how does this community come together? Like, what do we
Yeah.
stand for? And why do people come out? And then you need kind of someone on like more of the operational side. Like, hey, we're making money. Do we need a bank account? Like maybe we should do our taxes, you know? And then you piece all these things together and it's like, gosh, well, you could try to find one person that does all these things, or we could bring together a team of three people that each have these skill sets and they can work together. And I think that you know, starting a company example resonates here too, where oftentimes there are multiple co-founders. There are
Yep.
multiple people with different skills that have a shared vision, and we see communities have the same thing. So a lot of times, like you know, to just jump and build a community is often done best with multiple leaders.
Yeah. Which makes sense too. It's like less scary too, just to jump in with somebody else and have that co-pilot. So I know we're nearing end of time. I want to talk through some of these. I also just want to share all of this we plan to publish on our website as a downloadable report. So folks who want to dig into any of this data, that will be available. So I know a number of you have asked about that. I did want to touch on the financial piece of this, which is 60% of folks that are leading these groups um, are basically reporting out-of-pocket costs. Like they're spending their own money to run these clubs. Only 11% are earning any income, sort of net income. The revenue models, they're generating some event fees, some donations, and some membership dues. Um, Only 13% are receiving sponsorships, and just 3% are supported by employers in some way. So these are folks who are largely putting a lot of their time and their own money, and they're developing new revenue models to support them, but only 11% of those are generating enough income, or they're not actually losing money. That's not factoring in their time, which is not to say, like, I think it's more just to say, like, how awesome these people are that they're contributing so much of their time and money to make play possible for society. But I think it also does speak, and Eric, I know you and I have talked about this a lot of like, how do we help make this more financially sustainable? And how do we also honor these folks? The number of times I've heard people running these clubs where people that are members of them somehow just they take for granted the service and they don't fully appreciate what that person's putting into it. So I think the message more than anything else to me is like if you're part of a club, like know the person running it's probably putting in their own money and a lot of their own time, and just us being able to celebrate these amazing leaders.
Yeah,
Um,
I couldn't agree with that more, Aaron.
yeah,
This was the stat that struck me, and to me is the most concerning out of the whole survey that we did, which is that 64% of all community builders are losing money on
yeah,
their community every year.
yeah,
So they're paying to invest 3 to 10 hours on average every week to create these amazing hours. It's like that's out of balance.
yeah.
That's not that's not really fair.
I
And
want,
if we can
I want,
actually create a better environment, and this is something that we're quite passionate about through the platform to help with the funding aspect of this, I think we're going to have stronger communities and more successful ones.
Yeah. Jill?
yeah, I want to push back a little. Like I'm curious about like I played rugby throughout my 20s and totally volunteer coaches. We toured, I printed up t-shirts, the Gandhian Women's Berkeley Rugby Collective to pay for, rugby tours and beer. Um and I there's some I mean and I don't think it's true for everything, but I think there are things that we do that I think we can and should do unremunerated. And I think, and there's value in that. It's the difference between something being something amateur and something that's a job. I don't know. I just think,
It's a
uh,
tricky, it's a tricky
yeah,
topic because I think we see the scale of disconnection in our country, and we think about like if connection is the most important thing, and we're not paying for that, is that a problem? But you look at it from the other perspective, which is what you're sharing. I agree with that one as well. It's a complicated question, and it's also when you bring in the economic side of it, of a lot of people who just can't. If we're seeing such a huge
Yep.
skew based on economics of who's able to participate, I think we have to like. There's nuance there. I think it's not
There
black
is
or white.
nuance, I guess, and I would just offer in this moment, I'm feeling like capitalism is a little sketchy, the way we are practicing it in North America, and
Yeah.
and maybe let Canada off the hook there. And I would just say it is, religion, faith, like when you introduce market forces into communities, it changes the power dynamic, and I think. Yes, it needs to be addressed, but tread with caution.
Yes. No, it's tricky. It's tricky, and there's no one answer. I think there's a lot of different people. I think the number one thing is at a baseline is we need to acknowledge people for the work that they're doing. And where money is a barrier, we need to think about like how are we helping to remove that barrier for folks. So I know we've only got 2 minutes left. We didn't get through nearly enough of this as I had hoped. I did want to we've wanted to sort of put this sort of last point out here. I think just in terms of community builders that leadership burnout is emerging with 1 in 4 community builders considering stepping down right now. And 66% say that if they left their community, it probably would cause the end of their group. And some of that happens with any organization or group, but like we do have a burnout issue. I think especially if we're not expressing the gratitude, if we're not ensuring people at least if they need to be, are finding a way to be remunerated to cover their costs where necessary. And that this is the most vital resource in many ways in our country for addressing the connection crisis. And we need to take it way more seriously and to recognize the incredible volunteering, incredible contribution of these communities and the people leading them. And James is a great example. He does 1,000-person yoga in the park every week in Seattle during the summer, and he lives out of a van because doing that does not bring him enough income to support himself. And that to me like is very symbolic of like this challenge where we've got incredible people doing this work, but we're not really supporting it as a society. And I think much deeper conversation to Jill's point. But I want to thank the three of you for joining for this conversation. I would love to go another hour, but we can't. Maybe we can schedule more time. I do want to encourage people to check out Jill's book, Lakshmi's app. If you're interested, if you are a community builder, strongly encourage you to check out Heylo. It's an incredible platform, and to also join our community builder network, where we get together with folks who are community builders and to support each other. Because one of the things we found is that many community builders are actually really lonely because they spend so much time supporting other people's communities that are other people in their community. They don't actually take care of themselves. They no longer feel like they're part of their community. They feel like they're the administrator of their community. So we really wanted to create a space for community builders could actually be a member and not the leader of a community. And it's just been amazing to see the response to that and the energy around it. And if you are part of a community of play, please thank and recognize the leader of that. If you're not a part of one, strongly encourage you to join one. And you can go to Heylo to sign up for them. We're starting to do more and more club fairs in the cities where we operate so people can come and meet people who are leading these clubs. And if you don't have that in your community, let's talk about getting one started. But I feel like we had a nice appetizer of this conversation. We'd love to continue it. And we will post all of this on the website so you'll have access to it within a week or so. So thank you, Eric. Thank you, Lakshmi. Thank you, Jill. And thanks everybody for joining this. Any closing words from like a closing mocktail? Jill, closing thought?
I was going to turn to Lakshmi for a closing cocktail. But just thank you though. Thank you for the work you're doing at the chamber. It's really extraordinary.
Thank you.
Appreciate all of you. I'm in Paris, so it's 7 o'clock at night. So I'm gonna go have my mocktail. And yeah, look forward to seeing everybody soon.